A single piece of paper made me the richest player in this Minecraft server. I risked everything for this piece of parchment, and the way I got here is completely unexpected. It all started when this SMP updated. You see, the Border Bound SMP is a confined space that only expands once every week, and along with new biomes and structures, a secret scroll is hidden somewhere in the map. This scroll is essentially a treasure map, leading you to a super overpowered item, so you can see why it's valuable. Unfortunately, only 3 of these scrolls exist on the SMP at a given time, and even more unfortunately, that means lots of people would be looking for them. I knew of one man in particular, Galaxy, a member of the League of Greatness. If you didn't know, I have some serious beef with this faction. I sort of grew thousands of pumpkins to humiliate one of their team members, and it was a whole thing. I knew that I would have to prepare heavily if I wanted one of these scrolls. I especially needed to be cautious of Galaxy, because he was probably the greatest threat to my mission. If I could get lucky and obtain a scroll, I would become one of the most powerful players on the server. But if I could defy the odds and obtain all 3 scrolls, well, let's just say I'd be quite a wealthy man. And so my plan was in place. Collect all 3 scrolls of guidance and become rich. However, it wasn't quite that simple. I needed to be careful, especially with people like Galaxy running around. But luckily for me, I had one thing Galaxy didn't have: lots of shovels. It was time for the border to expand, and the nerves were kicking in. If I couldn't find a scroll, my entire plan would be ruined. As soon as the expansion took place, I ran straight into the jungle. I traversed the overgrown landscape and eventually found an outpost. This is a good sign for us, as it's far more likely that a scroll would be located near a structure. But there's still an issue. There are tons of other hiding places in this map, so the chances that a scroll is hidden here is incredibly... Oh, yeah, so that wasn't supposed to happen. I got incredibly lucky and managed to find a scroll within 10 minutes. So that's already 1 out of 3 scrolls obtained. But I knew for a fact that the other 2 wouldn't be so easy. But there was one thing that gave me hope. One thing that pushed me to not give up. If a scroll was found by somebody else, I could still obtain it using my persuasion skills. So I decided to wait. Wait for the other server members to do my job for me. Because as long as all 3 are found, it doesn't matter who finds them. I will get all 3 scrolls. Whether that means finding them myself or prying them out of their cold, dead hands. It wasn't long before the next scroll was found, and sure enough, it was Galaxy. I knew this moment would come, so I already had a plan prepared. I was going to call him and use my expert negotiating skills to make him forfeit his scroll. Hello.
Yo, what's good?
Yo, what's good?
So Galaxy, it's come to my attention that you may have a scroll of guidance.
Oh, yes, I do too.
So yeah, I was just wondering if you would just maybe pass that to me, give it to me.
Why would I do that?
Yeah, so it wasn't going to be quite that easy, but I had a backup plan. Would you be willing to do a bit of a gamble? Here's my proposition, okay? You and I, we have a challenge. You can choose any game of any kind. My proposition is that the loser has to forfeit their scroll.
My challenge is whoever has the largest output of wheat before Wednesday will win the challenge.
I will accept those terms. That's how confident I am. I will see you in a week's time. Galaxy had agreed to my terms, but this meant that now we were having a race to get the most wheat. And after my last video, I am sick and tired of farming. So I decided that I was going to automate the entire process. A fully automatic wheat farm was nearly impossible, but I was determined. While I began preparations, Galaxy began recruiting. He was trying to make people switch to his side, even my own teammates. Galaxy focused on manpower, while I focused on automation. It was a classic example of man versus machine, only this time it was all over a piece of paper. I had a basic idea for my farm. Harvest the power of water to break my plants for me, which would in theory divide the time it takes to do one cycle of the farm in half. But first I needed to make something smaller, something to earn me a reasonable amount of wheat to start out with. I settled on this design. This farm definitely worked, but it wasn't sustainable. It needed lots of bone meal, which is something I had very little of. You know what has lots of bone meal? The Nether. So I took the risk and entered the portal to another land. Okay, I don't think I'm quite ready for the Nether. We're going back. So after all that, I managed to get this much bone meal. Was it worth it? Probably not. Do I have enough wheat seeds to start my farm? Absolutely. And so began the construction of the server's largest wheat farm, a title that Galaxy seemed to be very proud of. But soon enough, he will cower in fear upon seeing my wheat highway. With my new farm, I was able to grow tons of wheat, but I needed something to occupy myself with while that grew. So I also made a large manual farm right next to it. We were able to harvest the power of bees. The end was in sight. I could practically feel that paper in my hand. I could practically feel the paper cuts. But there was one thing standing in between me and wealth. The 3rd scroll was still missing. Rumor has it that Dongo, another member of the SMP, found the paper, but later had it stolen from him. This means that the final scroll was in circulation somewhere, and I needed to find it. But first, I needed to distract Galaxy. So I sent my minions. I sent an entire army to keep him busy.
Why are you doing that?
Oh, I just like pumpkins. Perfect! He then proceeded to kill all of them. After Galaxy killed my snow golems, I knew I needed to avenge them by winning. Sadly, I was still unable to find the third scroll. However, the previous owner of it, Dongo, had joined the war effort and agreed to help me with my wheat farm. He was a professional Skyblock player, so I knew he would be very helpful in the long run. There was one thing I didn't account for though. Despite all this preparation, I had made one critical error. I didn't account for Galaxy's lack of a life. The next time I visited his base, imagine my surprise when I see a massive wheat farm, easily double the size of mine. This was the wake-up call I needed. My scroll was on the line and I needed to take this seriously. Luckily, I had an ace up my sleeve. Reduce, reuse, recycle. After farming, we could put the excess seeds in a composter which would generate bone meal. I could then use this bone meal in my smaller farm to grow wheat rapidly. My plan was brilliant and I knew that Galaxy was not being as clever with his extra seeds. Galaxy seems to think that he is the master of wheat, but what he forgets is that every king can be dethroned. And after killing him multiple times, I think he finally started to understand. Don't mess with BlehJester. Time for some calculations. It takes 1 to 6 day cycles, or 240 minutes maximum for wheat to grow. This may seem like a lot, but it also means that Galaxy's team is waiting this long as well. At most, his team would be able to harvest 3 to 5 times every real life day, assuming that one player is always online. Looking at the size of their farm, we can estimate that each harvest will profit 2 to 4 double chests of wheat. What does this mean for us? It means that we're gonna have to do a lot of AFK, but it also means that at most, Galaxy's lead could only be a few double chests. I logged off for the day, content with my discoveries. Imagine my surprise when I log back on, and our farm has doubled in size. So along with providing those calculations, Dongo massively expanded our wheat farm. He was my final weapon, my last resort. Dongo was a machine, and Galaxy was a mere man. With my puppet at my fingertips, I was unstoppable, but we had an issue. The faction plugin on the server glitched and won't let us place crops on this strip of land, meaning that 2/3 of our farm is rendered completely useless. And there's also the fact that I'm currently in school, so Galaxy has way more time on his hands. So to summarize, we are completely and utterly screwed. But it was too early to give up. I still had 24 hours to farm, and I intended on making the most of it, is what I said 24 hours ago. Yeah, we're kind of dead. Our total wheat was only a fraction of Galaxy's, so I had to think quick. I was backed up against the wall, with nothing left to do. I was ready to give up until my knight in shining armor arrived. The message was simple. It read, "Don't tell Thomas, but I'll help you farm wheat. I'll farm a lot, and even sabotage his supply if you give me one of the scrolls." Snappy was willing to sabotage, but to accept would mean to make a mockery of all our hard work. But a wise man once said that wheat is not about strategy, it's about your ability to lie. So I accepted his deal. We created the plan. After Galaxy shows how much he has, I'll distract him for long enough for Snappy to move all their wheat into our chest. After Galaxy sees we won, Snappy will bring all the wheat back before anyone even notices. But of course, there was a flaw with our plan. This was all banking on the chance that Galaxy didn't lock his chests. And there was also the very real possibility that Snappy could have been scamming me. But it was the only sliver of hope I had, so I held on desperately. The most valuable item I owned was at stake, and my entire plan relied on a man I couldn't trust. I had to pray that everything would go my way, and with that, I went to sleep. But I never would have been prepared for what happened the next day. It was the deadline for the race, and Snappy was unresponsive. I resorted to lying in order to stall for time, but in the end, I had no choice but to go without him. I had to pray that by some miracle, Snappy would join in time to save me. Do you know what day it is, good sir?
Due date.
Do you have your scroll?
Yes, I do. Right here.
Okay, can I see your wheat now?
Follow me. Follow me.
Galaxy led me to his wheat, and my worst fears became reality. 7 double chests, filled to the brim with wheat. And now you might be thinking, what's the big deal? Well, this is more than double what we had, okay?
Yes. Well, the 7th one, well, basically 6.
It was time to show my wheat, but luckily I had moved all my crops into a shack on the mountain's peak. So this means I still had hope, but it seemed like Snappy would be a no-show. So here it is. So this was the moment I realized I was completely screwed. When Galaxy opened that chest, he would see that I lost the race. I couldn't have that happen. I thought about my snow golems. I thought about how he had belittled my farm. I thought about every single thing Galaxy has said to me, and I realized I cannot let him win. Luckily, I'm always 10 steps ahead. Earlier when preparing the shack, I prepared a pitfall trap. It was only to be used as a last resort, but this was an emergency.
Oh. You have 6?
I did it. I killed Galaxy. In my eyes, in my professional opinion, I won the race. At least that's what I wanted to believe, but then reality set in. I publicly humiliated Galaxy, but I still lost the race. I forfeited my scroll, but I knew this would not be the last time I held it. This was only the beginning. I am not one to give up, so I sent Galaxy away and began preparing to dethrone the king. You see, Galaxy seems to think that he's the master of wheat, But what he forgets is that every king can be dethroned.